Mawasiliano kwetu, nguvu kwako. The Communications Authority of Kenya, opening your world.
As Kenyans, we don't waste a chance to perform. When we moved from analog to digital, we took the opportunity to share our talanta. And the rise of local radio represented our voices mtaani. It is important that we don't forget that. And now, in these difficult times, free educational shows are helping our children learn from home. And new ICT and educational platforms are going to make sure that no one is left behind.
Mawasiliano kwetu, nguvu kwako. The Communications Authority of Kenya, opening your world.
As Kenyans, we don't waste a chance to perform. When we moved from analog to digital, we took the opportunity to share our talanta. And the rise of local radio represented our voices mtaani. It is important that we don't forget that. And now, in these difficult times, free educational shows are helping our children learn from home. And new ICT and educational platforms are going to make sure that no one is left behind.
Mawasiliano kwetu, nguvu kwako. The Communications Authority of Kenya, opening your world.
As Kenyans, we don't waste a chance to perform. When we moved from analog to digital, we took the opportunity to share our talanta. And the rise of local radio represented our voices mtaani. It is important that we don't forget that. And now, in these difficult times, free educational shows are helping our children learn from home. And new ICT and educational platforms are going to make sure that no one is left behind.
Mawasiliano kwetu, nguvu kwako. The Communications Authority of Kenya, opening your world.
As Kenyans, we don't waste a chance to perform. When we moved from analog to digital, we took the opportunity to share our talanta. And the rise of local radio represented our voices mtaani. It is important that we don't forget that. And now, in these difficult times, free educational shows are helping our children learn from home. And new ICT and educational platforms are going to make sure that no one is left behind.
Mawasiliano kwetu, nguvu kwako. The Communications Authority of Kenya, opening your world.
As Kenyans, we don't waste a chance to perform. When we moved from analog to digital, we took the opportunity to share our talanta. And the rise of local radio represented our voices mtaani. It is important that we don't forget that. And now, in these difficult times, free educational shows are helping our children learn from home. And new ICT and educational platforms are going to make sure that no one is left behind.
Mawasiliano kwetu, nguvu kwako. The Communications Authority of Kenya, opening your world.
As Kenyans, we don't waste a chance to perform. When we moved from analog to digital, we took the opportunity to share our talanta. And the rise of local radio represented our voices mtaani. It is important that we don't forget that. And now, in these difficult times, free educational shows are helping our children learn from home. And new ICT and educational platforms are going to make sure that no one is left behind.
Mawasiliano kwetu, nguvu kwako. The Communications Authority of Kenya, opening your world.
As Kenyans, we don't waste a chance to perform. When we moved from analog to digital, we took the opportunity to share our talanta. And the rise of local radio represented our voices mtaani.
It is important that we don't forget that.
And now, in these difficult times, free educational shows are helping our children learn from home. And new ICT and educational platforms are going to make sure that no one is left behind.
Mawasiliano kwetu, nguvu kwako. The Communications Authority of Kenya, opening your world.
As Kenyans, we don't waste a chance to perform. When we moved from analog to digital, we took the opportunity to share our talanta. And the rise of local radio represented our voices mtaani.
It is important that we don't forget that.
And now, in these difficult times, free educational shows are helping our children learn from home. And new ICT and educational platforms are going to make sure that no one is left behind.
Mawasiliano kwetu, nguvu kwako. The Communications Authority of Kenya, opening your world.
As Kenyans, we don't waste a chance to perform. When we moved from analog to digital, we took the opportunity to share our talanta. And the rise of local radio represented our voices mtaani.
It is important that we don't forget that.
And now, in these difficult times, free educational shows are helping our children learn from home. And new ICT and educational platforms are going to make sure that no one is left behind.
Mawasiliano kwetu, nguvu kwako. The Communications Authority of Kenya, opening your world.
As Kenyans, we don't waste a chance to perform. When we moved from analog to digital, we took the opportunity to share our talanta. And the rise of local radio represented our voices mtaani.
It is important that we don't forget that.
And now, in these difficult times, free educational shows are helping our children learn from home. And new ICT and educational platforms are going to make sure that no one is left behind.
Mawasiliano kwetu, nguvu kwako. The Communications Authority of Kenya, opening your world.
As Kenyans, we don't waste a chance to perform. When we moved from analog to digital, we took the opportunity to share our talanta. And the rise of local radio represented our voices mtaani.
It is important that we don't forget that.
And now, in these difficult times, free educational shows are helping our children learn from home. And new ICT and educational platforms are going to make sure that no one is left behind.
Mawasiliano kwetu, nguvu kwako. The Communications Authority of Kenya, opening your world.
As Kenyans, we don't waste a chance to perform. When we moved from analog to digital, we took the opportunity to share our talanta. And the rise of local radio represented our voices mtaani.
It is important that we don't forget that.
And now, in these difficult times, free educational shows are helping our children learn from home. And new ICT and educational platforms are going to make sure that no one is left behind.
Mawasiliano kwetu, nguvu kwako. The Communications Authority of Kenya, opening your world.
As Kenyans, we don't waste a chance to perform. When we moved from analog to digital, we took the opportunity to share our talanta. And the rise of local radio represented our voices mtaani.
It is important that we don't forget that.
And now, in these difficult times, free educational shows are helping our children learn from home. And new ICT and educational platforms are going to make sure that no one is left behind.
Mawasiliano kwetu, nguvu kwako. The Communications Authority of Kenya. Opening your world.
As Kenyans, we don't waste a chance to perform. When we moved from analog to digital, we took the opportunity to share our talanta. And the rise of local radio represented our voices mtaani.
It is important that we don't forget that.
And now, in these difficult times, free educational shows are helping our children learn from home. And new ICT and educational platforms are going to make sure that no one is left behind.
Mawasiliano kwetu, nguvu kwako. The Communications Authority of Kenya. Opening your world.
As Kenyans, we don't waste a chance to perform. When we moved from analog to digital, we took the opportunity to share our talanta.
It is important that we don't forget that.
And now, in these difficult times, free educational shows are helping our children learn from home. And new ICT and educational platforms are going to make sure that no one is left behind.
Mawasiliano kwetu, nguvu kwako. The Communications Authority of Kenya. Opening your world.
As Kenyans, we don't waste a chance to perform. When we moved from analog to digital, we took the opportunity to share our talanta. And the rise of local radio represented our voices mtaani.
It is important that we don't forget that.
And now, in these difficult times, free educational shows are helping our children learn from home. And new ICT and educational platforms are going to make sure that no one is left behind.
Mawasiliano kwetu, nguvu kwako. The Communications Authority of Kenya. Opening your world.
As Kenyans, we don't waste a chance to perform. When we moved from analog to digital, we took the opportunity to share our talanta. And the rise of local radio represented our voices mtaani.
It is important that we don't forget that.
And now, in these difficult times, free educational shows are helping our children learn from home. And new ICT and educational platforms are going to make sure that no one is left behind.
Mawasiliano kwetu, nguvu kwako. The Communications Authority of Kenya. Opening your world.
As Kenyans, we don't waste a chance to perform. When we moved from analog to digital, we took the opportunity to share our talanta. And the rise of local radio represented our voices mtaani.
It is important that we don't forget that.
And now, in these difficult times, free educational shows are helping our children learn from home. And new ICT and educational platforms are going to make sure that no one is left behind.
Mawasiliano kwetu, nguvu kwako. The Communications Authority of Kenya. Opening your world.
As Kenyans, we don't waste a chance to perform. When we moved from analog to digital, we took the opportunity to share our talanta. And the rise of local radio represented our voices mtaani.
It is important that we don't forget that.
And now, in these difficult times, free educational shows are helping our children learn from home. And new ICT and educational platforms are going to make sure that no one is left behind.
Mawasiliano kwetu, nguvu kwako. The Communications Authority of Kenya. Opening your world.
As Kenyans, we don't waste a chance to perform. When we moved from analog to digital, we took the opportunity to share our talanta. And the rise of local radio represented our voices mtaani.
It is important that we don't forget that.
And now, in these difficult times, free educational shows are helping our children learn from home. And new ICT and educational platforms are going to make sure that no one is left behind.
Mawasiliano kwetu, nguvu kwako. The Communications Authority of Kenya. Opening your world.
As Kenyans, we don't waste a chance to perform. When we moved from analog to digital, we took the opportunity to share our talanta. And the rise of local radio represented our voices mtaani.
It is important that we don't forget that.
And now, in these difficult times, talanta. And the rise of local radio represented our voices mtaani.
It is important that we don't forget that.
And now, in these difficult times, free educational shows are helping our children learn from home. And new ICT and educational platforms are going to make sure that no one is left behind.
Mawasiliano kwetu, nguvu kwako. The Communications Authority of Kenya. Opening your world.
As Kenyans, we don't waste a chance to perform. When we moved from analog to digital, we took the opportunity to share our talanta. And the rise of local radio represented our voices mtaani.
It is important that we don't forget that.
And now, in these difficult times, free educational shows are helping our children learn from home. And new ICT and educational platforms are going to make sure that no one is left behind.
Mawasiliano kwetu, nguvu kwako. The Communications Authority of Kenya. Opening your world.
As Kenyans, we don't waste a chance to perform. When we moved from analog to digital,
a very good morning to each and every one of us. I hope you can hear me. If you can hear me, please raise your hand, physical hand in this case. All right, great. It's such an honor to be moderating today's event, which of course is the Safer Internet webinar that is focusing on child online protection and safety. And amongst us, we do have distinguished guests from Kenya and in different capacities that they hold. And so it's going to be quite an interesting conversation we're going to have today. And so I'd once again like to say good morning to each and every one of us who has joined in this particular virtual event, because I know that, you know, online protection or child online protection is something that we should all care about. And just to give us a brief into what exactly it is, I think that we need to know that child online protection is an initiative aimed at protecting children when accessing information from the internet and when using communication services and devices. So in short, that is pretty much why we're here today, to basically understand what exactly it's all about, what more do we need to do, how do we need to go about the challenges, because when we give access to our children to hold these gadgets and devices, how much freedom do they have, what do they need to watch, what do they need to stay away from? So all of that is why we're here to have this particular conversation. But before we can even begin, I would like for us to go over some virtual house rules, which I'm sure many of us know about. But just to avoid uncomfortable situations where you leave your virtual, seat and possibly maybe go to the washroom and your audio is on, would like to make sure that that doesn't happen, that we can hear what is happening in the background from here. So just to go over the basics, would like to request that if you're not a panelist or a speaker, you can actually mute your sound to avoid any inconveniences and interruptions. And so would also like to request that in the event that you're stepping away from your device that you're using for this particular virtual event, you can also mute your video and mute your sound as well. And when you would like to raise a question, there is a Q&A section on your interface. That's at the bottom of your interface. There's a Q&A section there. You can type your question in the Q&A section, or you can raise your hand in case we will have an opportunity to have video questions being raised. So just to make sure that we are all aware of that. And to our panelists, we are going to be allowing a maximum of 2 minutes as a response time for each question that is asked. So while I understand that we would like to sometimes, elaborate a bit extensively about this particular topic, I'd also like to request that we keep our responses concise and precise and to the point, but at the same time, putting across the message that is meant to be put across. So let me begin by introducing myself. My name is Joy Doreen Bira. I'm a media personality and a strategic communicator, and it's such an honor to be moderating this event. I am going to just go through our program quickly for us to just get a hold of what to expect. We're going to be having our opening remarks or welcome remarks that are going to be given by Mr. Christopher Wambua, who is the Director, Consumer and Public Affairs at the Communications Authority of Kenya. And then we will have remarks by Mrs. Mercy Wanjao, who is the Acting Director General at the Communications Authority of Kenya. And we'll have a keynote speech as well from Ms. Nadia Ahmed Abdallah, who is the Chief Administrative Secretary, State Department of Innovation and Youth Affairs at the Ministry of ICT, Innovation and Youth Affairs here in Kenya as well. And then after those remarks, we are now going to get into the panel discussion, which I am so excited about because I am seeing that we do have quite informed panelists. Among them, Mr. Francis Karanja, who is the head of National ICT Innovation and Integration Center at the Ministry of Education, Science and Technology. And we also have Ms. Cicely Musyoki, who is the Assistant Director in Filed Services, Directorate Discipline at the Teachers Service Commission. We have Mr. Kennedy Keva, who is the National Treasurer at the Kenya Primary School Head Teachers Association, KEPSHA, and we have Dr. Alfred Atwoli, who is the Dean of Medical College at the Aga Khan University Medical College of East Africa, and Mrs. Patricia Mushiri, who is the Assistant Director, Consumer Affairs here at the Communications Authority of Kenya. So, and then we will have a Q&A, and which is why this is important for us to make sure that if we have any questions, don't put your questions in the chat box, which I'm already seeing some of us doing. I would like to request that we place our questions, type our questions in the Q&A section of your Zoom platform. So it's easy for us to have a look at them and have the specific panelists answer to those questions. What would even be more helpful is for you to specify to whom the panelist to whom the question is directed at. It's easier that way. And then maybe at the tail end, we will have some interactivity from the online audience, in this case, the social media platforms. We're going to pose a question to the followers on there as well to get their responses. So in short, that's pretty much why we're here. So let's get started. And I would like for us to get started with our program today by inviting Mr. Christopher Wambua, who is the Director, Consumer and Public Affairs at the Communications Authority of Kenya. And for those of us who might not know much about him, I'm sure he's just about to tell us a whole lot more about himself, but Mr. Christopher Mbua, a warm welcome. The floor is yours now.
Thank you, Doreen Mbira. I hope I am audible.
Yes, you are.
And I wish to join you in welcoming all participants to this important webinar on child online protection. And as you may have seen from the program, our theme is the role of educators in child online protection and safety. And the reason why we are very keen on these issues as an authority is that ICT services have become very pervasive and ubiquitous across the country over time. And we are seeing that children are increasingly becoming heavy users or consumers of these services, especially the internet. And the primacy of ICTs and internet services has become even more pronounced during this COVID-19 era, where children, our youth, are relying on the internet to learn and communicate and also get entertainment due to the restrictions that have come about as a result of COVID. And it's important that guardians and even children themselves take the necessary safeguards to ensure that they do not get exposed to inappropriate content that could pose a lot of harm to them as consumers of ICT services. And we also know that the internet, while it has very, very productive and good outcomes in learning and other aspects of the development of children and our youth, there are certain vulnerabilities that exist online. And these include access to inappropriate content, grooming, recruitment to terrorism and other vices. So it's important that parents and guardians actually develop a keen interest on what children are consuming online. And that's why in 2015, the authority rolled out a campaign on child online protection that was targeting teachers, guardians, and parents, so that they get to take a keen interest on what their children are accessing online. And we have noted that over the years, we've continued to reinforce information or the key messages that were contained in that campaign through our county ICT forums that we've taken out of Nairobi to the counties, so that this discussion or conversation does not remain in our urban areas, and so that the people at Mashinani can be able to appreciate the opportunities that the internet presents, or ICT presents, and the vulnerabilities that exist or lack online, especially for our children. And we have also noted that there is need now to develop another campaign that will be focusing specifically on children and the youth, so that we give them the necessary information that will help them use the internet and ICTs generally in a very productive manner, instead of using it for inappropriately and in a manner that could easily harm them. So we are very keen that you've spared time today to join us in this important forum, and we look forward to a very engaging event. The Director General was supposed to join in, but she may not do so, but she has nominated Mr. Christopher Kemei, who is the Director in charge of Universal Service Fund, to represent her in opening this important event. And we hope that we'll have a good time with you during this webinar, and that you'll be able to give your contributions, your insights on how we can make the internet a safer environment for our children. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Christopher Wambua, who is the Director, Consumer and Public Affairs at the Communications Authority of Kenya. He also did mention that there is need for a campaign to focus specifically on children to understand exactly what their needs are and address those needs as well. Without further ado, I'd now like to invite Mr. Christopher Kemei to come and give us remarks on behalf of the Acting Director General, Mrs. Mercy Wanjao. Mr. Christopher Kimei, the floor is yours now.
Yeah, thank you very much, Doreen. I believe you can hear me loud and clear.
Yes, we can.
Thank you very much. First of all, let me say good morning to all that are present in this webinar, and you are most welcome. I will be delivering remarks on behalf of Mercy Wanjao, the Acting Director General of Communications Authority of Kenya. Let me then proceed with those remarks, but first let me recognize Ms. Nadia Ahmed, the Chief Administrative Secretary, Minister of ICT, Innovation and Youth Affairs. Let me also recognize Mr. Francis Karanja, Head of National ICT Innovation and Integration Center, Ministry of Education, Science and Technology, Mrs. Cecilia Musyoki, Assistant Director in File Services Directorate, Discipline, Teacher Service Commission, Dr. Lukoye Atuoli, the Dean of Aga Khan University, Medical College, East Africa, a representative from the Kenya Secondary Schools Aid Association, Mr. Kennedy Kiava, the National Treasurer, Kenya Primary School Aid Teachers Association, Mrs. Patricia Mushiri, the Assistant Director, Consumer Affairs at the Communications Authority of Kenya, Mrs. Joy Doreen Bira, yourself, the webinar moderator, thank you very much. Educators and teachers, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I wish to warmly welcome you all to this webinar, which forms part of the ongoing efforts by the authority to foster a conversation with stakeholders on making our cyberspace safer, particularly for children. From the onset, allow me to appreciate and thank the various organizations represented here for accepting our invitation to participate in this webinar. Indeed, your participation here today not only shows your commitment to the cause of making the internet a safer place to all, but also the value you place on our children. Today's theme, which is the role of educators in child online protection, could not have come at a better time. Reports show that cyber criminals have taken advantage of the COVID-19 pandemic to attack their targets viciously, including online learners, among others, betting on the increased internet uptake and usage. These cyber trends must worry all of us, particularly those within the education sector that have had to leverage emerging technologies to deliver learning to children during this COVID pandemic. There is therefore need to continually engage and create understanding on the risks and the vulnerabilities that our children continuously face in the cyberspace, and thereafter trigger conversations and actions among the various players in this space. The authority is charged with the responsibility of protection of consumers within the ICT sector. However, we cannot do this alone. Given the many cross-cutting issues in the space, we are called upon to synergize, collaborate with other stakeholders so that together we can create an environment where children can exploit the immense possibilities that lie in the internet. Ladies and gentlemen, there are many reasons why educators are so vital in child online protection. First, you have close and consistent contact with the children. Second, educators have a professional and legal responsibility for reporting any child abuse, including in the online space. You will all agree with me that while educators facilitate children's learning, children cannot learn effectively if their attention or energy is sapped by conflict inherent in being abused in any form. Third, school personnel have a unique opportunity to provide programs and guidelines that can help children identify risks, sites, or habits that can make them fall prey to online predators. It is with this in mind that the authority organized this webinar to shed light on online risks and guide on how and where you can report them. This webinar also presents with an opportunity to hear from experts in the education sector on how we can make the online environment better. It will indeed also go a long way in further triggering the development of other initiatives within the industry and among other key stakeholders to protect children online. Today's forum is part of a robust initiative that the authority has been implementing, dubbed Child Online Protection, as Mr. Wambu has indicated earlier, that we rolled out about 5 years ago. This program has been key in ensuring that our children are protected from unsuitable content online. This includes empowering parents, guardians with the required skills and knowledge to deal with the vulnerabilities and risks facing children. The authority, through the National Kenya Computer Incident Response Coordination Center, often referred to as KSAT, which is the country's focal point in matters cybersecurity, has been able to resolve cybercrimes and also to respond to criminal incidences experienced online. The KSAT, which is a collaboration between government agencies and international organizations, is dedicated to handling complaints relating to cybercrime, including those that are facing children. As I conclude, I would like to state that for many educators, your professional responsibility is intricately connected to a deep personal commitment to the welfare of children. The value of this personal commitment is significant because without it, child abuse and neglect would thrive, rendering any efforts to remedy them ineffective. It is this sense of personal responsibility to and for children, which is perhaps the strongest reason for educators to be at the center of the prevention of child online abuse, among others. With those few remarks, ladies and gentlemen, it is now my honor to invite Mrs. Nadia Ahmed, the Chief Administrative Secretary, Minister of ICT, Innovation and Youth Affairs, to address us. Thank you all for your attention.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. Mr. Christopher Kime, thank you for representing Ms. Mercy Wanjao. Mr. Francis Karanja, Head National ICT Innovation and Integration Center, Ministry of Education and Science and Technology. Dr. Nancy Masharia, CEO, Teachers Service Commission. Dr. Lukoy Atwoli, Dean of Aga University Medical College, East Africa. Representatives from Kenya Secondary School Head of Association, Mr. Kennedy, National Treasurer, Kenya Primary School Head Teachers Association, Mrs. Patricia, Assistant Director, Consumer Affairs, Communication Authority of Kenya, educators and teachers, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, good morning once again. It is a great honor and a pleasure to join you this morning for this webinar aimed at raising awareness on child protection among stakeholders and in particular players within the education sector. I wish to commend the Communication Authority of Kenya for organizing this webinar, which will go a long way in creating a safe space for our children in the online world. As a ministry, online child protection has become of great importance to us, and I'm glad that the authority has been at the forefront working with various stakeholders to ensure continued capacity building, awareness creation, and publicity. It also goes without saying that the target group for this webinar is very deliberate, especially by incorporating actors within the education sector and our learning institutions. Ladies and gentlemen, our Constitution lays great emphasis on the rights of children and in particular protection from harm. Article 53D specifically provides for every child the right to be protected from abuse, harmful cultural practices, and all forms of violence. At the same time, the Constitution makes the acquisition of education a fundamental right to every child. Indeed, the rights of the child occupy a special place not only in our supreme law, but also in our hearts. As parents, as teachers, and as guardians, we are obliged to take care of them, provide for their education development, and guard them against harm and negative influences in the society. Just a few years ago, our worries concerning children centered on the negative influence by their peers, which in most cases was attributed to drug abuse and delinquency and the mass media. While this problem still exists, it is a fact that the emergency of the digital age has presented yet another source of fear and concern over the influence to which it exposes our children. As more and more children around the world gain access to the online world through their own smartphones, tablets, and computers, it is clear that our collective efforts to protect them will increasingly need to focus on the virtual realm as well as physical one. Ladies and gentlemen, during this COVID-19 period, there has been a notably increasing in cyber crime incidents as criminals constantly evolve in terms of their tactics to target loopholes in network systems and individuals. Data from the authority shows that between April and June 2021, for instance, the National Kenya Computer Incident Response Team Coordination Center received 529 cases out of 57.1% were online impersonations, 24.4% online abuse, and 18.3% online fraud, while 0.2% were on child abuse. While the numbers related to children may seem negligible, as a ministry, we are deeply concerned that during the COVID-19 period, there has been a notably increase in child online sexual exploitation, cyberbullying, and cyber harassing targeting children. There has also been an increase in number of downloads and uploads of indecent photos and videos of children. This is as a result of rapid adoption of digital solutions for learning, for entertainment, and socialization by more households. So as a government, we are making every effort to ensure that we have sufficient policy and legal frameworks to address the challenges arising from cyber and other computer-related crime. That is why in the National ICT Policy, we have undertaken to develop an innovation online value program to instill the right online values in children, as well as foster development of technical tools and services in the market to minimize the risk of exposure to children. As you know, the ministry is also working on a multi-sectorial Child Protection Act plan that will help all partners come together to protect online child safety. This will also see law enforcement agencies and judicial officers equipped to adequately handle children's online protection related matters. As I conclude, I wish to reiterate that no one can doubt the power and potential of the internet. It plays an ever-increasing role in the government, in the industry, and in our daily lives. But as we know, the internet has also negative sides. It is an environment that brings wonderful opportunities, but that also conceals predators, some of whom target our children. So it is through forums such as these that as a country, we can come up with solutions to ensure that our online environment is safe for all. We appreciate your support and commitment to addressing this important issue, and we will be leveraging on your expertise to develop appropriate measures to handle it. Now, having said those remarks, it is my honor to declare this Child Online Protection webinar officially open. Thank you for your attention. God bless you and God bless Kenya.
Thank you very much, Ms. Nadia Ahmed Abdallah, who is the Chief Administrative Secretary at the State Department of Innovation and Youth Affairs, Ministry of ICT, Innovation and Youth Affairs. Thank you so much for those remarks. And I'm actually excited and looking forward to just looking into the frameworks and policies that are specific to child online protection and safety. And for those of you who didn't know, there is actually a call line that you can use in case you think that a child is being abused, or if you think a child is encountering online abuse. You can send an email or you can call specific lines. And the email that you can use is incidents@ke-cirt.go.ke, or you can actually call the Incident Response Team Coordination Center through the numbers that I'm going to share in the chat section. But for those of you who would like to write them down, the numbers are 020-4242-720. And yeah, you can be able to actually make a phone call and have your concerns addressed as well. For the mobile phone numbers, there is a mobile phone number 0703 042700 in case you need to report any issue to do with online abuse. Those are the numbers that you can use. So I'd like to say thank you so much to our keynote speaker, who is Ms. Nadia Ahmed Abdallah, who did give us some insights as well in regard to what the government is planning to do, has already done, and also to Mr. Christopher Kemei, who gave a speech on behalf of Mrs. Mercy Wanjao, who is the Acting Director General at the Communications Authority of Kenya. Thank you so much. We do appreciate that. Would now like to invite us to pay attention to the following message about child online protection and safety. These are just some short videos that we'd like for you to pay attention to before we get into our panel discussion. And to our panelists, you are allowed to smile because I think you're not giving us the smiles that we are looking forward to this morning. So please relax and smile. This is an interesting conversation we're just about to get into. So let's first of all show you some of these clips so you're able to get an introduction into what we're all about today.
Sisi Kenyans, we don't poteza a chance to connect na watu wetu. Yeah, that's crazy. Undersea cables and telecom providers give us reliable and affordable data. And we didn't Zuba. We now have close to 40 million internet subscriptions. So umesema ni nyanya ama kitunguu? Wewe umesikia nini? And our mobile connectivity has helped us spread our biasharas wider. Kijana mdogo kama wewe unafaa kununua kama hizi. And now in these times of crisis, our telecom and data networks are enabling us to work from nearly anywhere. While new technologies open up a digital Kenyan economy that will leave no one behind.
Mawasiliano kwetu, nguvu kwako. The Communications Authority of Kenya, opening your world.
All right, and now at least we know we have about 39.3 million internet users and going up in the country today. I would now like to take this opportunity to introduce to us our panelists who are going to be delving into the discussion on the role of educators in child online protection and safety, because it's very important for us, not just as educators, but also as parents, guardians, different organizations that have a lot to do with child online content usage. And also, generally, everybody around the country should be concerned about child online protection and safety as well. So I'm going to be introducing our panelists one by one, and also to give you some deeper insights into who exactly they are so we can get to understand who these personalities are. I'm going to start with Mr. Francis Karanja, who is the head of National ICT Innovation and Integration Center at the Ministry of Education. He is currently also if I might give you a bit more insights into what the center does, the center coordinates and oversees the implementation of ICT integration in the State Department of Early Learning and Basic Education. And his qualifications also include a Bachelor of Science degree in Computer Science with Education and a Master's degree in ICT integration and Instructional Design. And he also has occupied various positions in the Kenyan education sector, among them the head of ICT integration, innovations and emerging technologies section, which was mandated to promote ICT integration in education, but also advise on new and emerging technologies and pedagogies in learning, teaching, as well as management. So a warm welcome, Mr. Francis Karanja. And we also have Mr. Kennedy Keva, who is the National Treasurer at the Kenya Primary School Head Teachers Association, KEPSHA. He has worked as a teacher in several primary schools in Kenya and has been a head teacher for 25 years. That is 2 decades and 5 years, ladies and gents. He has also served as KEPSHA's regional chairman, Metropolitan Region for 2 years, and has also served as deputy national treasurer for 4 years. He's currently the head teacher of Kangemi Primary School and the national treasurer of Kenya Primary Schools Head Teachers Association, but he's also the director of Msingi Bora School and an upcoming private school in Sultan Hamoud Makueni County. A warm welcome to you, Mr. Kennedy Keva. You know, you can activate your sound so I know that you're there and say something like, thank you. The same goes for Mr. Francis Karanja. So I know your sound is okay.
Thank you so much.
Fantastic.
Thank you. I'm glad to have me.
Great to be
here. Thank you.
Amazing. We also have Professor Alfred Atwoli, who is the Dean of Medical College at the Aga Khan University Medical College of East Africa. He's a professor in psychiatry with extensive leadership, teaching, and academic research experience. He's the former Dean of the Moi University School of Medicine, where he excelled at building collaborations and partnerships between the School of Medicine and academic medical centers in Africa, Europe, as well as the United States, transforming it into a regionally leading research and graduate medical school. Professor Lukoye has a Bachelor of Medicine and Bachelor of Surgery from Moi University. And among other things, he also has a PhD from the Department of Psychiatry and Mental Health at the University of Cape Town in South Africa. He's a visiting scientist at the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health and an honorary associate professor at the Department of Psychiatry and Mental Health at the University of Cape Town. A very warm welcome, Professor. It's good to see you.
Thank you very much, and happy to be here.
We also have Mrs. Patricia Mushiri, who is the Assistant Director, Consumer Affairs, Consumer and Public Affairs at the Communications Authority of Kenya. Mrs. Patricia Mushiri serves as the Head of Consumer Affairs Division here at the Communications Authority and is responsible for consumer empowerment through education, provision of information, and spearheading the authority's efforts in the development of consumer protection and mechanisms, where she has served for over 10 years. And she also has over 15 years experience in customer relationship management, strategic consumer advocacy, as well as sales and marketing. Prior to joining the authority, she worked and has wide working experience in the private sector, having worked in the energy, insurance, and other sectors as well. She's the member of the Marketing Society of Kenya, associate member of the Society of Consumer Affairs Professionals in the United States, an affiliate member of the American Marketing Association, and a fellow of the Telecommunications Management Institute of Canada. She is a holder of a Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of Nairobi. A warm welcome to you. And I think we also have Miss Cicely Musyoki. Great. We also have Miss Cicely Musyoki, who is an Assistant Director in Filed Services at the Directorate Discipline at the Teachers Service Commission. Ms. Cicely, it's so good to see you today. And we can't wait to hear what you have to say about this very important topic we are discussing today. So a warm welcome to all of you. To the participants, I would like to request that if you have any questions at all, please specify to whom the question is going to in the Q&A section of your Zoom platform. It's at the extreme right, at the bottom right of your Zoom platform. That's where the Q&A section is. So to start with, I would like to start with Mr. Francis Karanja. And maybe this should be a general question to just about all of us as panelists. I think the most important question we are here to seek answers to is who is responsible for taking care of children online? Is it the parents? Is it the teachers? Is it a collective responsibility? Mr. Karanja, let me start with you.
Thank you, Ms. Doreen, and good morning all. That's a very good question. And I want to say before even I respond to that question that this discussion has come at the right time. And I will not say that it is long overdue, but I can say this has been a continuous discussion in order for us to be able to secure our learners and our children when they are engaging online. And I want to say from the position from the Minister of Education is that we know that this should be a collective responsibility. In fact, I know as we continue in this discussion, we will discuss on parental engagement in education. But I want to say that we know internet is not only restricted in a school and an education setup. We also have informal setting where our children and our learners are accessing internet. And so that's why we will not restrict this responsibility to educators only. That one will be asking too much. We need to make it a discussion that we will allow everybody to assist and aid in enlightening our learners on how to be safe online. So basically, I would say personally, my position is that it is a collective responsibility for all of us. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Kennedy Keva, what do you think? Who is responsible?
Well, thank you. Just like Dr. I would say it is a collective responsibility of everybody, the parent at home, the teachers in school, the government in legislation, and the owners of the sites that allow the harmful content. Collective responsibility. Thank you.
Collective responsibility. Professor Atwoli and Mrs. Patricia Mushiri, as well as Mrs. Cicely Musyoki, do you all agree that it's collective responsibility? Do we have any diverging views in regard to that?
No, I think firstly, it is society's responsibility to take care of the children and the disadvantaged and the vulnerable in our society. And therefore, you wouldn't pinpoint any single individual as being responsible. It's all of us, and we all have to play our part. Thanks.
Right. Mrs. Mushiri?
I want to say I agree with my fellow panelists. I also want to bring in industry, and here I'm talking about the ICT sector. I also think they have a responsibility when developing applications, hardware. They also have a duty of care. So I agree with my fellow panelists. Thank you.
Great. Mrs. Musyoki? I think your microphone is mute. Kindly unmute your microphone.
Yes, thank you for that. So I do agree that this is a responsibility that we all must be engaged in as teachers, as parents, as guardians, as society. It is a phenomenon that not a single individual or unit can handle. So let's take it from there. Thank you.
Okay, great. So now that we all agree that it's collective responsibility, we also know that, Article 29D of the Kenya Constitution states that every person has the right of freedom of security, and which includes the right to not be subjected to torture in any manner. We also know that there is one specific clause that protects the lives of children, the lives and rights of children. So let me come back to Mr. Karanja. In regard to the position of the Ministry of Education, with regard to integration of technology in the education sector, what exactly is the position?
Thank you, Lorraine. And I think this is a very good question. We know that the Ministry of Education has a broader mandate of providing access to quality and relevant education. And you see, any tool that can be availed to support that, or to be able to facilitate that provision of quality and relevant education will always be explored. Mm-hmm. And so basically I want to say, if you look at all our legislation, our policies, we are looking at even the Vision 2030, which anchor the ICT as a foundation. And so the Ministry of Education position on ICT integration or technology integration is that ICT is a core of facilitating the provision of quality and relevant education. Right. I would like to put it in a simpler term, because we have a number of policies that are supporting this, and I know we will be able to explore that. But I want to say that we know ICT will always enhance, make delivery of a curriculum easier. And sometimes we look at it as a tool for delivering and implementation of our education goals. Where am I looking at it as an entangler? It is because it is the tool that we have been able to use in quite a number of instances to facilitate the provision of that mandate, as I said it. Let me talk about something that is very critical, that when we look at the investment that the Ministry of Education has been able to put in our education sector in regard to ICT, it's massive. And that tells you that we hold and we take ICT or technology as a key component of provision of education. And I said this one should be considered as provision of quality education and relevant. Now, you look at it as how can you enhance access to education? We know there are people who cannot be able to go to education institutions due to some reasons here and there. And so ICT and technology have been proven to facilitate that access. And so basically, I would say the position of the ministry is that technology is core, technology is critical, and we have been able to provide what we call direction and guidance to be able to integrate technology in education.
All right.
Thank you.
I'd like to come to Ms. Cicely Musyoki. In regard to the Teacher Service Commission, technology, I'm sure, has been an integral part, especially looking at the kind of 2020 and 2021 that we are having. How can we promote the positive and productive use of internet among students and learners? Because I think this is a much needed conversation. And from what I'm seeing, the people in Homa Bay and Bungoma Sub-County and Narok as well are Bungoma County and Narok West Sub-County on the chat section are also asking about how to integrate students and learners in the whole perspective of technology.
Okay,
and yes.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that question, which is fundamental, especially at this time. You may have, participants may have noted that the Teacher Service Commission in liaison with the Ministry of Education and other partners have been training teachers in the curriculum, in the competency-based curriculum. Mm-hmm. And one of the core competencies that has been identified that must be integrated in our learning experiences and outcomes is digital literacy. Now, that, as my colleague in the ministry has said, goes to show that technology is fundamental at promoting the learning. Nobody must be left out. So we are in the process of training our teachers. Of course, it is a process that has begun. We have done several cohort of the teachers we have trained, who we expect also to cascade to others, because it may not be done at the same time. And this is hoped that it will reach all the teachers. And of course, our teachers being the very first people that the learners interact with are expected to affect the what I would say, the content that reaches the students and the learners and our children in a whole. So we are already at that level, and we are very supportive, working together with the ministry and other stakeholders to ensure that this is done. In this era, we cannot afford to be lackluster about it. Thank you.
I love that. We cannot afford to be lackluster. And Mr. Kennedy Kiva, from what Ms. Musyoki has just talked about, not even allowing the space for being lackluster, how have educators and teachers leveraged on this technology to facilitate learning, especially during the pandemic? And with all the cyber attacks that we've been seeing going on, what has been that experience?
Yes, I agree with Madam Musyoki, our employer, that CAPTCHA and all teachers indeed are the wheels on the ground. So in teachers, yes, we are up to the task, and we've leveraged on technology to see that it succeeds and that the learning outcomes that are intended are achieved. Number one, WhatsApp platforms for classrooms. WhatsApp platforms might sound simple, but the simpler, the easier to implement. I'm talking of WhatsApp platforms for parents, because parents are key. Parents will provide the mod, the MBs, the environment outside the classroom. And so teachers have done that, and it's easy to organize teaching outside the classroom walls. And number two, being available online. Teachers are realizing that, yes, we need to be available online most of the time, because, well, you don't need to go high tech and use interactive boards and iPads and all that. But the mobile phone, voice calls and video calls are so useful, and they can be excellent brainstorming avenues. In class, when it comes to classroom situations, teachers are mixing lectures or the traditional teaching with video clips and anecdotes to make learning fun, you see, and have an interactive lesson. Taking advantage of online resources, another area. There's a lot of there's tons of material online. I mean, you don't need to stick to the straitjacket of the curriculum designs or the syllabus per se. Teachers can take advantage of that. The choice of technology, not all technology is relevant in every subject. Dramatization or demonstration, for example, may find YouTube such a good resource, for example, by teachers, and it's easy to use a mobile phone and succeed in that. And finally, the simple LDDs and TDDs, I mean the learner digital devices that we have and that Karanja talked about, yes. And the teacher digital devices that we have, well, they be lacking the CBC content as it now, which is true, because that is a fact. But they are very useful. You can use it as a camera, as a to take photos, as the learners build their portfolios, the CBC grades, you see. And so actually on that area, I want to wake up the teachers and those of us listening, will talk to them that the devices, the few that are still gathering.
Right. All right. Thank you. LDDs, learning digital devices, at least that's something we need to specify about that. I'd now like to come to Dr. Alfred Atwoli, technology is important. And just like the previous speakers have said, it's good for integration. There's all of these WhatsApp groups. And while we cannot speak for those who cannot afford these smart devices, I want to hear your opinion on the impact of technology, including the internet, on child development, especially the brain, cognition, as well as behavior. Because I don't know, for some, I'm going to give an example of my two sons. I think that the more time they spend on these devices, there's a high chance of them getting addicted. So I want to hear from you in regard to the development of the brain, the cognition, and all of those behavioral changes that come with the usage of devices.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much, Doreen. I think, firstly, overall, there are and there have been guidelines about how use of gadgets affects child development. One of the things that we know for a fact is that if a child spends a lot of time, especially children under the age of 5 to begin with, spending a lot of time using these gadgets, there's a difference in their brain structure if you compare with those who are not using these gadgets and are doing other things, because the brain responds to the environmental cues in order to determine the directions of growth and which parts of the brain will develop differently from others. So that has been established. Secondly, children who spend a lot of time on gadgets, when we do these tests of cognitive performance, how well your thoughts are organized and how fast you can think, they underperform compared to children who do not spend a lot of time on gadgets. So this is established science. So the long-term effects are still being studied, because for a huge segment of the world's population, these gadgets are a relatively recent phenomenon. And it has, children having access to these gadgets is not something that has been common even 20 years ago and 15 years ago. So this is still being studied, but suffice it to say that we are convinced that there are changes that will happen to your brain if you spend a lot of time on gadgets compared to other activities that will be more physical, more engaging, and more interactive with the environment. Now, having said that, then, we have to recognize that this is knowledge that was generated pre-COVID-19. Now, with COVID-19, it became a lot more difficult for children to engage in the ways that we would like them to engage, to have more touch, to have more playing in the environment, to have more interaction with their peers and with others. And therefore, we have to start balancing the risks associated with using these gadgets with the benefits that might accrue through proxy engagement using gadgets. And I think that is something that we can develop further in this webinar.
Okay, great. And I like that you mentioned that, the brain responds to environmental cues. So the more time you spend on a device, the thinking process is likely to slow down. I think it's important for us to talk about how much time do we allow our children to spend on these devices, especially in the new normal that we're looking at, where learning has now since moved online. Not all of it, but at least a great percentage of it. Mrs. Patricia Mashiri, I'm coming to you now, because in your introductory remarks, you did mention industry players, the kind of content that they're developing, the devices that they're putting out there, the techpreneurs and whatever it is that they're trying to put into our devices as learning material. What are the most common cyber threats? Because with all of this increased content has also come increased cyber crime. But what are the most common cyber threats that Kenya is facing at the moment, and how do we protect children from them?
Thank you very much, Dorina, for that question. There are several types of threats out there, but in terms of Kenya as a country, the three most common threats that we have picked out as a Communications Authority of Where are ransomware, malware, and phishing. Now, ransomware is just the type of software application that is designed to block access to a computer system until a certain amount of money is paid, and then they allow you to do that. So it's more blackmail, so they deny you that access. Now, when it comes to malware, malware is designed to either damage, disrupt, and also to give somebody else unauthorized access to your system. And phishing, which I think is more common than we understand, is like the stealing of your own personal identification data, for example, that relates to your credit cards and stuff like that. And this is normally done to you through social engineering, which is an email sent to you that you then open. So those are the three most common cyber threats that the authority has detected over time. Thank you.
All right. And when you talk about malware as well as the blackmail, I'm sure there are so many ways in which, as organizations that develop policies or implement them, there are several ways in which you've tried as much as you can to combat these threats. Do you want to share with us some of those?
Okay, let me start by saying that Kenya has a robust cyber security strategy and framework in place. A couple of things have been done, higher field by the policymakers, national government, our ministry, and others. And these are strengthening the legislative, regulatory framework. That's really key. Two, we have laws that have been developed, like the Computer Incidents, Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Act. We have the Children's Act 201. So we have a robust policy and regulatory framework. As an authority, we have what is known as the KESAT, which is the Kenya Computer Incidents Response Team Coordination Center. This is a multi-agency center manned by CA and other law enforcement officers that is resident here at the authority that actually deals with the safety of the cyberspace. We've continuously created awareness and shared information on our corporate events, on our websites in terms of the issue you have raised. And the KESAT continuously issues advisories, opinions, assistance to stakeholders in government and out of government in enabling players strengthen their computer systems against these threats. So there are several others, but those are some of what we've done.
All right. Are there incidences where you have given penalties, and why exactly is this concern so high regarding online safety, especially for children?
I think Mr. Karanja did mention, I think it was Mr. Karanja, the last year during the COVID pandemic, we did note that there was an increase, of course, in use of computer systems, our cyberspace. We're all working, children were learning from home. A lot of us got applications to do with the virtual private networks in our homes. So the reason why it's such a concern is that once the usage increased, especially during the last year, actually, I think with respect to statistics, we had 38.4 million cyber attacks in the last quarter of last financial year. And what we realized is that the cyber threats became more complex. That's why it's a major concern. They became more innovative, those threats. And there are also institutions, such as schools, that were really vulnerable, that didn't have the proper firewalls in place. So I guess that's why it's a key concern, and one of the reasons why we are having this dialogue this morning.
All right, that's some insightful information there. I mean, 38.4 million cyber attacks. Oh my word, that literally means, yeah, and that means, I was just looking at the numbers for the internet users we have in the country. If we're going by this information, that means each and every internet user has at some point been affected by cybercrime. Ms. Cicely Musyoki, I'm coming to you now. In regard to the use of technology, of course, it has changed the method and practice of teaching in the country. And while we are cognizant of these changes, we cannot also leave out the fact that there are some challenges that teachers are facing with online learning. Do you want to share some of those with us? And also, how are you incorporating students or learners who do not have access to these devices, and the influence that those who have online devices will have on those who are offline?
Thank you for that. There are always challenges when we are undertaking something as significant as this. And really, I would say it is practically new in the environment that we are in. So the first major challenge is a lack of sufficient digital devices, as you have implicated, that there are those children and teachers we have not been able to reach. Mr. Karanja would probably give us the figures, but I'm sure he will agree with me that we have not really managed to reach out sufficiently in terms of provision. It's good to note that in this CBC program, we have started with the grade 4-5 class now, and we are moving on. And as we continue, we will increase the investment as we move on. Of course, he did also say there is a humongous investment that government has made, and I want to believe the government will continue making provisions. As you have already stated, we are unable to reach everybody. In fact, we have not even adequately trained our teachers, and that is one of the major challenges that we are overcoming. In some of our areas where our schools are, some of our schools are in very remote places where even internet and electricity, such provision that is really basic in connectivity so that we can use digital literacy properly, we still have challenges. But in these areas, we have to be positive and grow along. We have started, I want to believe, as a country, and with the support and the effort of all stakeholders in the education sector, because we agreed everybody is part of this. We are going to continuously grow and manage the challenges. Thank you.
All right. Continuously grow and manage the challenges. I love that optimistic side of the Teacher Service Commission. But tell me about the guidelines that have been put in place to support and guide teachers when it comes to the online learning environment, because where kids are involved, it's so easy for them to deviate from the subject matter and move on to something else. And as we're talking about child online protection, what kind of guidelines are you giving the teachers in this case?
As the Teacher Service Commission, I want to state that we are working very closely with the Ministry of Education in this. And I think they're really the policy makers on that line, because remember, Teacher Service Commission's mandate is really in teacher management, and more of the provision, sufficient provision of the policies and the capital and the requirements of even the human resource may be on the line of the ministry. But we are certainly working together. Ours is fundamentally on the training aspect, in which we are partnering. Maybe Mr. Karanja can augment my argument.
All right. Great. Mr. Karanja, in addition to what you possibly are going to add on to what Ms. Musyoki just mentioned, I also want to hear from you in regard to the policies that have been put in place to support and guide teachers in this online environment, and also how technology has impacted teaching in remote areas, especially during the pandemic, because just like Ms. Musyoki mentioned, not everyone has been able to access this online learning.
Thank you, Doreen. And I think I'm happy with my colleague's statement on how Teacher Service Commission is supporting integration of technology. You know, in as much as we are the policy makers, the ministry, they implement as our teachers among the other stakeholders. So I just want to put something into context. From the ministry perspective, for us to integrate technology effectively, we usually look at it in 4 pillars, in 4 pillars, that we ensure that we have the policy in place. We also ensure that we have the right, or what we can say, the relevant infrastructure, that is ICT infrastructure. And also we go ahead and ensure that we have provision of quality digital content. And another component that is very critical now to make the 4th is the capacity development. We usually ensure that in every component of ICT in education, there is capacity development and I'm happy my colleague from Teacher Service Commission has talked about that. We know we may not have done much, but we feel like we have done guided the integration of ICT in education. Amongst the 4 pillars, ICT security, safety, and ethics are critical. And I'm saying this because we are discussing about internet or online safety. Mm-hmm. We usually provide guideline on what we call parental consent mechanism. I'll just enumerate a number of policies because there are quite a number. That is very important. We also ensure that content that is used by our learners is approved and is relevant. You know, approval of the content is a mandate of Kenya Curriculum Development Institute, that is KICD, but it is our SAGA, it's our semi-autonomous agency, and that is the mandate of the ministry. We also usually guide on how to authenticate and to authorize what we call setting user appropriately. And that's why you saw, and I'm happy, my colleague Kepsha, a chair, talked about the digital literacy program. And when he was talking about TDD, this is teacher digital device. When he was referring to LDD, it is called learner digital device. When we were deploying digital literacy program, we looked at it into 3 phases. The first one, we wanted to let our learner know how to use technology, and that is the lower grade. Know how to use technology. In the other phase, we were anticipating that we will now let our learner use technology to learn. You know, all these are programs that we have been able to put in place. And every project that we put as a ministry, we always have a guideline for us to be well guided. And so basically, like now we are adopting strategies because with the COVID, we did develop guidelines, what we call the re-entry guideline, that were deployed in September last year, even before we reopened our schools. And in those guidelines, we had deliberately put a component of online safety, security, and ethics. It was deliberate. They are there in our website. Individuals can be able to download. And we were looking at guiding our teachers, our educators, and even our learners on how best to be able to utilize ICT. So basically, I wanted to say, yes, like my colleague, Madam Sisiri said, yes, we have been able to put a lot of policies in place, starting with the Education Act. Education Act provides or promote integration of ICT in teaching and learning and management. And that's why, you know, we have a robust management information system that in the ministry that we call NEMIS, that now we have a central repository of the data for our learners. And that is the one that we have been, we are using even what we're calling the Form 1 replacement and even data management of our learners. Number 2, in the policies, we have National Education Sector Strategic Plan. You know, if you have not planned, you may not be able to achieve. We have been able to anchor it very well in our education sector strategic plan, and ICT is well enumerated, is well anchored and well guided on how it is going to be integrated. In order for us to be able to actualize the Education Act, Sessional Paper number 1 of 2019, also, in fact, it underscores the utilization of ICT in transforming education and highlights the challenges of access to, I'm happy my colleague said, access to quality and relevance and equal chances in education.
All right.
I may not enumerate all of them, Doreen, because we have TVET Act, we have University Act, all of them, KICD Act, because of vetting the content, the digital content. But I can say we have a number of policies that guide ICT in education.
All right. So I would like to bring in Mr. Keva, because just before you vanished and came back, which is an online learning challenge as well, you know, there were a number of issues that I wanted to, you know, hear from you on as well regarding the challenges, you know, that come up with the upsurge of technology among learners and teachers. But also, do Kenyan teachers have the necessary technological know-how? Because Ms. Musyoki said that the Teacher Service Commission has not adequately trained teachers on online teaching material. In this case, I would call it teachers' digital devices usage. And looking at this challenge particularly, how are you addressing it? And of course, there's also been an exponential increase in the number of incidences involving cybercrime. How are you dealing with this from your level? Yeah, talk to us about that.
Thank you, Doreen. Yeah, it's true. I got challenges. My Wi-Fi in my room went down. I had to establish a hotspot. I think I'm clear now.
Welcome back.
Yes. In keeping up with the technological challenges, which are upsurging, teachers don't want to be left behind. Teachers need to do this. Teachers, number one, need to get a device. Let them arm themselves with a device, a good device. It's necessary. For a teacher, we don't need to wait for government to provide the device. I would actually, in my view, think that a good device is a basic need to one who takes teaching as a career. That's number one. And loading the device also with bundles. That's necessary for any teacher, because teachers today need to go online. They need to go online frequently. They need to go online regularly. They need to do that in order to connect with peers, with other educators, with colleagues, and learn and share new experiences in teaching and learning. They need to keep abreast with new packages and new apps that support instruction and make achieving learning outcomes easier for the teacher. Number two, teachers need to attend training workshops that are conducted every now and then. Then the government is doing that often. The ministry is doing that, KCD is doing that. And yes, Madam Musyoki was right. The TSC as of late, actually last June, TSC managed to train, I think, a third of all the teaching force in our public schools, both primary and secondary. I want to believe 100,000 primary school teachers were reached, because every school out of the 24,000 or so primary schools, 3 teachers plus the head of institution attended remote learning methodologies training for 1 week. And this was insightful. It was eye-opening. It was very important, where teachers were able to learn, among others, the use of Zoom, for example.
Right. Okay. Did we lose him again? I think did we lose Mr. Keva again? All right. Anyway, we'll come back to him when he returns. But I'd now like to come to Dr. Twoli. You know, we've talked about, and you did mention, mental health and how it slows down, how addiction to devices could slow down the thinking for a child. But what medical interventions exist to address the challenges that you did mention and some of the issues that you did point out in regard to cognitive behavior? And also, what are the most prevalent mental challenges brought about by technology? Because it's important for us to know, as we bring up these children with online learning and access to devices, we need to control and know how to address some of the challenges that come with use of technology.
Yeah, thank you very much. So a lot of the discussion this morning has been around use of devices and online spaces for teaching and learning for our children and students. I would appreciate a lot more conversation around designing this entire system around the learner rather than designing it around the teacher. So obviously teachers need to have online resources, teachers need to have gadgets, teachers need to ensure they're continuously developing themselves professionally. But then as they design the interface between themselves and the learners and how they're going to transfer this knowledge to the learners or facilitate learning, they have to design this around the needs of these children who are still developing, whose brains are still developing, whose emotional competencies are still developing, whose social competencies are still developing. So in other words, as we think about use of this technology, we must look at it from the perspective of the child and the learner first, in my view, and then design everything around that about what does a teacher need in order to meet the needs of the learner. And as you design it this way, then you have to take into consideration what are the impacts of this digital technology that we're using on the learner outside of facilitation of learning. And there are many. The children who are spending a lot of time on gadgets, there are physical outcomes. So obviously physical health would suffer. Everything else being equal, these children would end up, being more likely to be obese, for instance, being likely to eventually develop chronic diseases, metabolic conditions, and so on and so forth, if they do not get sufficient physical exercise as they engage on learning with these gadgets. We have already discussed the cognitive challenges that can arise if the most significant mode of teaching and learning is using digital technology. So they're spending a lot of time eyeballing gadgets rather than doing things with the environment. There are social consequences as well, because learning goes beyond pedagogy, goes also in interacting with the people you are with in class, your peers, and so on. And children learn through that kind of thing, through play. They learn how to interact safely with others. They learn social rules, social mores, and so on by interacting with others. And they learn how to deal with disappointment when they compete among themselves in a social setting. So that's an important thing that needs to be taken into consideration. And then there are psychological consequences, which include the mental illnesses that you have asked about. And the first, obviously, is the cognitive decline, the issues around how digital gadgets affect how the brain handles the environment. This is a two-dimensional interaction that is, almost pretending to be three-dimensional, but it is really a two-dimensional interface between the brain and the environment when you look at a gadget. But then there's a lot more beyond that. The brain needs, several more dimensions in order to develop in a good way. Then there are risks of development of conditions like depression and anxiety and substance-related problems, including what we are now starting to see, that is almost considered addiction or dependence on the internet or on certain online games and so on and so forth. So this is a risk as well. Another risk is the issue about while the teacher and parents and others are trying to educate children, there's always a risk of misinformation because children may not have developed the ability to distinguish fact from fiction when they're looking at internet sources, when they're interacting with people online. So that is another risk that has to be taken into consideration and mitigated. And the other thing is bullying.
Now, Doctor, are there telltale signs that you can see and detect in a child when you think that, okay, I think now it's time for them to see maybe some medical person?
Yes.
Time, which are those signs that we see and say, okay, it's time, let's go?
Yeah. So I was just going to add two things, including the other additional risk like bullying, because bullying is a big problem, both offline and online. And bullying has serious mental health effects, has been associated with post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, and anxiety disorders. And so we have to mitigate against that. And finally, issues around emotional regulation. And so you will start having signs that a child is having difficulties with, whose source is online or through the gadgets. When you find a child who has difficulty stopping use of the gadgets. So a child who wants to take that gadget everywhere, wants to go with it to bed, wants to go to eat with it to when they're having lunch, when they're interacting with other people, they're constantly on their gadget. And when you withdraw it, then you get actual signs of almost withdrawal symptoms, where somebody throws a tantrum, somebody becomes irritable, somebody becomes physically aggressive, and so on. And that means that they have a problematic relationship with the gadget or with the online resources that they're interacting with, and we have to deal with that. Other signs you might find would be, children becoming withdrawn emotionally when they're not interacting with the gadget, or even when they're interacting with it, becoming a lot more anxious because of the things they're interacting with online, and children changing their behavior from baseline. You knew this child behaves like this child interacts like this, and then you notice that over time, they're starting to change how they interact with people. Perhaps this is time to have a conversation about the negative impacts of these gadgets on their mental health and also on their social health as well.
Absolutely, I agree with you entirely. And I would like for us to just wrap this up so we can allow for time for the Q&As as well. And because I'm seeing there are quite a number of questions as well that are popping up through the Q&A session or section. And so, I'd like to finalize by just asking a general question, because as we build or as we strive to build a technologically competent education system or education and technology system, we are also cognizant of the fact that we have a responsibility to build a young and resilient generation of internet users, responsible internet users. How do we go about this? And I want to hear from Ms. Mushiri, because I want to start from the source, which is the Communications Authority. And maybe you could bundle that up with the process of ensuring online safety, but then at the same time, how do we ensure that we build a young and resilient generation of internet users?
Thank you, Doreen. That's a very good question. I think we've all agreed that it's a collective responsibility, that each one of us has to do what we do and do it well. And talking from the authorities' perspective, we have to enable that robust ecosystem you've talked about by putting the correct guidelines in place, strengthening licensing conditions, developing child online protection guidelines for the industry, enabling the industry also to be robust in terms of development of applications that can help these children thrive. We must not be too fearful of the design of the internet in terms of what can happen, what can go wrong. We must just embrace that as a tool for learning, for living, for entertaining, and come up with tools that can help these children thrive. As an authority, we'll continuously create awareness around the issue you've raised. We have an application, a mobile application developed by our KESAT team, where complaints can be made. So institutions must also have complaints redress mechanisms or platforms where when things go wrong, help can be sought, complaints can be made, and information is available. I like the issue of continuous training, and I also appreciate Professor Tuoli's comment that probably the focus should move away from designing programs around either the teachers, the guardians or parents, and more towards the learners. And I've taken that as a key takeaway from where I sit at the authority. And I also want to state that we'll continuously work with others. And that's why we're here to listen to this panel of experts as an authority, because given the complex nature of how the whole ecosystem is developing. So we could do more within our mandate as an authority. We are doing more. We have the tools. We are interacting with the industry. And we really have quite a bit of information as to all the efforts we're putting in place on our website.
Okay.
Thank you for it.
All right, thank you very much. Ms. Musyoki, I want to hear your views on this. At the Teacher Service Commission, what are you doing to ensure that we're building a resilient generation of internet users from the primary level all the way to higher institutions of learning?
Thank you. As we stated earlier, technology is here with us and it is here to stay, and it is a facility that we are enjoying even to be more effective in the education sector and learning of our children. I want again to reiterate that technology and digital literacy, for that matter, is integrated in all aspects of learning in the current system, in all aspects. We've identified it as a competency. And as we are training our teachers, we are telling them integrate it in every single lesson. So that whether you are teaching history, because I've seen somebody comment that the history, the humanities, teachers are rather not very active in it. I want to challenge the teachers that it is you as an individual teacher, as you're doing your lesson preparation, as you're preparing for what outcomes you want, that you decide this is the point at which I integrate the digital literacy. Whether you're challenging the learners to check up in the Googles certain facts, even in history, whether you're challenging them to participate with the certain gadgets in how they can contribute and even learn more. Remember, the CBC is actually is more learner oriented and not the teacher focused. So in all this, we are really anticipating that we will come out better when we focus on the literacy. And as we mentioned, the challenges may be there, but we are soldiering on and we ask for everybody's participation. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Mr. Keva, I want to hear from you very briefly. How do we go about this, in terms of resilience and online users? Those are very hard words to find in the same sentence because there's a lot of addiction and bullying and all manner of things going on there. But we would like to hear your views in regard to what you're doing to ensure that our online users, our internet users, these young people are resilient and are doing the right thing, being responsible while using the internet and the devices as well.
Thank you. Yeah, we know that the sites have parental control and all that. And from the chats and Q&A, I'm seeing those who are following wanting us to provide a way of how to protect these children from from the stuff that is going on in the internet outside of school and keep them safe in school. I would choose to go different here and say, I wouldn't really go for insulating the children from what the internet has out there. You cannot do that. This is what I think schools and educators can do. In the early years, grade 1, 2, 3, up to the year 6, inculcate values. That's the only time you can change these children and impact on their values. After that, you can do it. And while we are doing this, I don't say we teach this. Teaching is good. Teaching love and safety and as being assertive is very good. But we are told by those who know it better that values are caught and not taught. And so if I teach them not to access this site, and I am doing it, and they are seeing me doing it, or not to listen to genge music, as I've seen here, and I'm listening to it. Anytime they bring their books for marking, they find me listening to it. When they come to the staff room, they find us watching these channels. You see, they are catching the values that are dear to them from us. And those that we are teaching are going uncaught. So
leading by example.
Values.
Right.
Values.
Okay. Fantastic. Thank you. I'd now like to go through some of the questions and so that we can have your closing remarks, especially for Mr. Karanja and Professor Toli soon after the Q&A. There's a question here. Someone is asking, what can be done to the, and I think Mr. Kiva just even mentioned that, what can be done to the moral songs coming up in Kenya called gengetones that is affecting the minds of our children? So I'm going to say building values, just to reiterate what Mr. Kiva said. But then there's a question here as well. In secondary schools where we have specialization in 2 subjects, teachers of humanities are normally not given much recognition and consideration in terms of ICT training. How will the Teachers Service Commission, Ministry of Education, and other stakeholders ensure that there's an inclusive procedure? First priority given to the maths and sciences. I don't want to dwell much on this question because it's not entirely related to our focus of today, which is online child online protection and learning. But let me see here, a question from Anne Nduriri, who is saying, my question, our children visit the cybers in towns, in this case, the cyber cafes. How safe are they? Mrs. Muchiri, do you want to respond to this question? Because I think it's quite related to the consumers as well as the service providers of the internet.
I think one of my fellow panelists said, I think it was Cecily Musyoki, who said government, stakeholders, policymakers, industry players cannot be everywhere. So we cannot be everywhere. However, there's something we can do. One, I think like what we are having this morning in terms of creation of awareness, reaching out to partners, collaborating. And allow me to mention that the International Telecommunications Union, which is the UN agency mandated on matters ICT, has a very well-developed framework for how we can collaborate to achieve the outcomes that we all wish. So I do note the question in terms of access to some of these materials at the cyber cafes. In terms of our regulatory regime, the CA does not regulate the cyber cafe at that macro level. So I would ask that parent, that teacher, that guardian to reach out to us so that we can be able to give the necessary information. You also need to really know where these children are, especially when they are at home, what they access, not only on their mobile gadgets, but when they visit the cyber. A couple of years ago, we did a very robust campaign where we visited all these cyber cafes. And going forward, I see an opportunity where the cyber cafe owners can become part of our partners. So they would be represented on a panel like this, where we also hold them responsible and reach out to them so that when the children go to these cyber cafes, the necessary protection mechanisms are in place. Thank you.
All right, great. Next question I would like to pose here is a question coming from Charles O'Dowell, who is saying, well, I think there is a really big concern in regard to the kind of music that young children are consuming, going by the questions in the Q&A session. I don't know who is going to address this. Professor Toli.
Yeah.
Toli.
I think I think it's a valid concern about the kind of music and not just music, the kind of entertainment, if you like, that young people are able to access online. Before I say what I'm going to say, I have to preface it by saying that we have to appreciate that young people also can be absolutely essential partners in protecting themselves and protecting others from this online content. You will discover that they know a lot more about what's available out there than you do or than I do. And they are able to devise ways of protecting each other, and they can advise us. So we need to include young people in these discussions if we are going to be effective. Having said that, it is impossible, so look at online spaces the same way we used to look at village squares or market squares or city squares, where everything goes. And you cannot stop it from happening. You cannot stop people from misbehaving online. But you can take the opportunity when you're with a young person who has encountered this kind of content that you're not happy with. Use that as a teachable moment. So I wouldn't say don't listen to Genge. I would say if a young person is listening to that kind of Genge, if I am a teacher, I might, for instance, make it a subject for discussion in class and say, so this is the content of this song. This is what they're trying to pass as a message. Can we discuss whether this message is wholesome or unwholesome? And can we then discuss whether it is a kind of genre that a person of your age should be engaging with, or if there are other more wholesome things that we can do? And young people will then come up with ideas that will tell you, which are, that they will influence their own peers more than if a teacher told them, don't listen to Genge. They will go immediately after that class and look for what is Genge, and go and download that music and immediately listen to it without any input from an adult who would be able to guide them on whether it is wholesome or not. So I think that is important for us to start thinking that you cannot stop what is happening in the market square, but you can use it as a teachable moment and help guide children away from areas in that market square that have unwholesome content and direct them towards areas that have wholesome, useful content that will build them.
All right, thank you so much. There's a question here. There's a concern on parents and how central they are when it comes to children using the cyberspace and gadgets. How do we ensure that parents get this message? Because, while the parent might be the most informed user of the digital devices, there is also a possibility that they will bypass information and misinform their own children. So how do we go about this? And there's also concern here. Parents are very central when it comes to children using the cyberspace and gadgets. How do we ensure that parents get this message? I don't know if Mr. Karanja can also tap into this particular question, because while we're looking at supply of devices to schools, we cannot leave out the fact that parents contribute and play a big role in ensuring there's responsible usage of these learning devices and the content, not just the hardware, but the software as well, which is more concerning.
Thank you, Doreen. And I think that's a good concern. And I'm happy that the capture chair is here. When we were deploying our devices, the digital literacy program devices, we had to engage our parents. So the best thing is to involve the parents and guardians, and we let them understand what is required of them. That is very critical. And they were coming when we were deploying, we were telling them that they needed to understand how technology can impact negatively and positively. That is one thing. The other important thing I can say, we are also requesting our parents to be role models. Most of the times, if we use technology responsibly, our children will always emulate us. That is a very critical thing. And sometimes children and learners will do something not to go against the wish of their parents. And so basically, that is very important that we involve the parents and guardians. We also request them to guide or to lead from the front, to show them how responsibly they can they can use the technology. Also, we sensitize. And I said earlier, when we were doing re-entry, we were able to engage even parents, because we knew then that there were children that were left at home, and they're going to use technology to get content from KICD, content from radio, and we needed the parent to guide. And so
we had guidelines that were able to guide the parents on how to secure the devices. What we said that also something that we call parental consent mechanism, and parents were very much involved. I want to say this because you have asked how we need to make our society, our young society resilient. In the CBC, the competence-based curriculum, we have mainstreamed digital literacy. And that is very critical. We are trying to let our learners have that ability to engage online positively, critically, and competently. So why are we doing this? We have been able to mainstream it from grade 1 up to grade 12. By the time they are coming out, they will know how to responsibly use technology. Another important thing that what the ministry is doing is that we have a platform, a crowd that we call Kenya Education Crowd, where in that crowd, we vet content, we disseminate that content that we have already vetted to our learners in order for us to ensure that they are consuming the right content. Also, Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development vet platforms. There's such a question that I had, platforms that like learner management system, content management system, even the virtual environment that we are using in our learning institutions, they are able to be evaluated, and we ensure that we are taking to our learners the correct and the right platform. I think I had to say that because I liked the challenge that we were given by Dr. Tori, that we need to look at the design from the learner perspective. So basically I can say to sum it all, we are also as a ministry collaborating with the ministry, department and agencies, and I'm happy that Communication Authority is one of them, to ensure and to enforce standard and guideline, also to strengthen the capacity of our ICT users, also to make sure that our networks and leakages are secure. This is what we are doing, and we're also providing the necessary guidelines. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. I don't want us to close before we can hear from the Communications Authority in regard to the reporting of online abuse procedure. I know I did mention, some numbers on there, but I think it would make more sense if you reiterate that there is a procedure that Kenyans in general can use in case they want to report child online abuse. And cyberbullying and cybercrime. How do we go about that? What is the process of addressing any complaints to do with online abuse? Mrs. Mushiri.
So thank you, Doreen, for that question. It's okay. Thank you for that question. And you did elaborate that, one, we have KESAT Coordination Center, and I think you shared the contact numbers, and continuously our team will put the numbers for everyone to just have those numbers. So there are 3 ways you can report an incident, you can report a vulnerability, or you can actually report a child online abuse incident. Now you just need to go to our website, and it's very simple to use, and you'll be directed how to file that. The other thing I need to mention is now that we have a mobile application, and it is available on the Google Play Store and the App Store, it is much easier to file a complaint, and you can also even file a complaint anonymously. So that application has a feature that allows you to file the complaint anonymously. Now, besides coming to the authority, please, you can also file a complaint through Child Helpline 116. I think that's also available. We also work very closely with the Anti-Human Trafficking and Child Protection Unit, which is a unit under the DCI. They are also available direct Department of Child Services in every county. So there's a coordinator in every county. So there are several ways in which you can file a complaint and it'll get to us. And of course, the most available platform is actually through the schools themselves. Just recently, allow me to mention, Doreen, we began developing standard operating procedures for how child online complaints are going to be filed, investigated, and prosecuted in the cases that warrant prosecution. And the Ministry of Education and TSE were critical stakeholders in the development of those SOPs. It's still work in progress. So there are very many platforms through which you can file a complaint, but the KESAT is a 24/7 operation. We have experts there waiting for those complaints. We can be able to take down sites in places where your photos or graphic representation that is negative is put out there. So we are here to help. That's the reason why one of the mandates of the authority is consumer protection, and we recognize that a critical consumer is the child.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great, thanks. Dr. Atwoli and Ms. Musyoki, in about a minute, I'm just going to give each one of you a minute, Ms. Musyoki, Dr. Atwoli, as well as Mr. Keva, just to give your final remarks, actually 30 seconds, because we are pressed for time. So let me start with Ms. Musyoki, your parting shot.
Okay, thank you. In a nutshell, we need to corroborate with each other. We need an intelligence approach, collaboration, so that we can help each other, and we are a team that will be able to surmount any challenges related to the protection of our children online. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Collaboration, concerted effort. Mr. Keva, I want to hear from you.
Yeah, thank you. I think it is Albert Einstein who once said that I never teach my pupils. I only provide the conditions in which they can learn. Let us not fear the internet. It is a huge and wonderful enabler. The children can only get better. Thank you.
All right. The internet is an enabler. The children can only get better. Mr. Karanja?
Mine, I would say we are all called upon to be educators on online ethics, safety, and security. And we have the power to ensure that all those around us are responsible cyber citizens, and we can make them what we call cyber heroes. Thank you.
We can make them cyber heroes for sure. Dr. Atwoli, I'm coming to you now.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I think my parting shot is that I view technology as a tool that can be used across all life sectors, including in education. I think any interventions we design to protect children need to be child-centered, and to some extent, youth involvement, meaningful youth involvement needs to be put in place so that they educate us even as we seek to protect them. And finally, looking at the internet as a proxy for the real world. So any protections you would put for your child in the real world, you need to put them also for your child online. Anything that you would use in the real world to find out whether your child is mentally healthy, you should also have the same interventions on the online spaces to ensure your children are mentally healthy. Thank you very much.
All right. And finally, I think I'm going to ask Mrs. Mushiri to give a parting shot. Yes. Parting shot, Mrs. Mushiri.
Thank you, Doreen. Thank you, panelists. We are honored for you to take time off to be part of this conversation, this dialogue. Let us keep it going. I like what Cecily said in terms of reaching out through a multi-agency approach, partnership, collaboration. None of us, no entity can win this war on its own. Let's keep children at the center of this conversation, and please look out for a very elaborate 4-month campaign that we're about to launch in September on child online protection. Give us feedback in terms of, we'll be on various platforms, television, print, social media, magazines, etc. So be on the lookout for the campaign. And this campaign is geared and targeted towards children. So give us feedback and let's keep this conversation going. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your deep insights, informative views in regard to how best we can protect children online and ensure that they are safe. I think we have gotten an understanding of the role of educators in child online protection and safety. I want to appreciate you all and for sparing the time to even just be a part of this. You know, I know that you're all very busy people, but you spared time to talk to us about child online protection and safety. We do appreciate that. And once again, I would like to reiterate to our panelists that it's important to keep a smile on your faces. Thank you, and thank you so much. So let me just go through some of the comments here in the chat box. There are quite a number of people from across the country. I was seeing some people who joined us from Tana River, Migori County, Meshach Okech from Migori County, who's saying this has been an informative session. And I'm seeing someone from Tana River who is asking, shall we be sharing the recordings by the end of the day? I think there's going to be, in coming days, you're going to be receiving a bit more details on the event itself, but also if your question was not responded to, there's going to be what we call frequently asked questions that are going to be compiled by the team and are going to be sent through to everyone who participated and shared their email. So you can also look out for all of the details about this. I'm seeing some people also are requesting that Dr. Twoli holds a specific session on children's mental health arising from their online addiction. I think that would be important. Maybe the Communications Authority can consider that in coming days or in coming months as well, probably add it to the online campaign as well. I'm seeing Betty Rotiken, who is saying, thank you for the very educative session. You're very welcome. And Gertrude Atigala also saying, thank you for this informative and educative session. All right. I'd like to say thank you all so much for your participation and for sticking around right from the time we started up until now. I'd now like to invite Mr. Christopher Wambua, who is the Director, Consumer and Public Affairs at the Communications Authority, to give us closing remarks and a vote of thanks, I suppose.
I'll do that on his behalf. He's been called into another assignment. So
sure.
Allow me, on behalf of the Acting Director General, Mercy Wanjao, to thank our keynote, our chief guest, Madam Nadia Ahmed Abdallah, the Chief Administrative Secretary, State Department of Innovation and Youth Affairs. I also want to thank Christopher Kemei, who stood in for Mrs. Wanjao, and the panelists, the very able team of fellow panelists. Want to thank you most sincerely for taking time off your busy schedules to be with us. I cannot forget the participants. This webinar would not have been as successful as it was without your comments, your questions that we have noted as an authority. We value your time. We value that you took time off to be in this event, and we're really grateful. Allow me to also thank the team that put this together, Caroline Murianki and the team. We don't take it for granted. Well done. To our service providers, HNK, awesome. This was a really good event. And last but not least, Doreen, you've done an amazing job. We'll be smiling for the rest of the afternoon. We appreciate your moderation, your skill, and you really brought the theme of the role of educators in child online protection and safety webinar. You really brought it live. On my own behalf, thank you very much. We appreciate. God bless you and have a lovely afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So much. Thank you. Thank you very much. And well, you know, in radio stations, they say when you ask people to send their views or their comments and you don't mention them, People take offense. So I'm going to try to mention maybe 10 people in the chat section. Judith Asubwa, Caroline Morianki, Pesta Lillian, Moses Otieno, Benson Kilu, Olipa Ogeto, Christine Kipsang, Agnes Sorim, George Warari, Gideon Kiptui, Sheila Toya, Daniel Mumba, Beatrice Oko, Eli Ondiek, Rashid Omar, Aliwo Amoy, and everyone else who has participated in this particular session. Thank you all so much to each and all of you. I do appreciate that. And I would like to say to everybody who is on social media platforms, the hashtag to continue using even after this session is Safer Internet and Safer Internet CA webinar. Continue that hashtag. If you have any concerns, any questions, continue to use that hashtag to send them through. We are going to compile all the frequently asked questions and have them sent to you via email. By we, I mean the Communications Authority of Kenya and the team that they're working with in their communications department. So thank you all so much. And thank you to the Communications Authority for trusting me with this role. Until the next one, have a good afternoon, happy August, happy rest of the year. And to everyone who has just started school or whose children have just started school, I hope that you allow them use these devices responsibly. Thank you so much. God bless you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Goodbye.
The internet is like a huge university with millions of doors opening up a world of learning for our children. It's one of the most powerful educational tools ever invented, accessible through our mobile phones and home computers. A global system of interconnected computer networks that can transport you to another world. But it can also expose our children to harmful influences and bad behavior. As a parent, you need to know how to protect your children. Be the cop.
Sisi Kenyans, we are always ready kuzunguka for bidhaa na biashara. So when the postal sector opened up,